The myth of Set's conflict with Horus, Osiris, and Isis appears in many Egyptian sources, including the pyramid texts, the coffin texts, the Shabaka stone, inscriptions on the walls of the temple of Horus at Edfu, and various papyrus sources. The Chester Beatty Papyrus No. 1 contains the legend known as the contention of Horus and Set. Classical authors also recorded the story, notably Plutarch's De Iside et Osiride. These myths generally portray Osiris as a wise king and bringer of civilization, happily married to his sister, Isis. Set was envious of his younger brother, and he killed and dismembered Osiris. Isis reassembled Osiris' corpse and another god, in some myths Thoth and in others Anubis, embalmed him. As the archetypal mummy, Osiris reigned over the afterworld as a king among deserving spirits of the dead. Osiris' son Horus was conceived by Isis with Osiris' corpse, or in some versions, only with pieces of his corpse. Horus naturally became the enemy of Set, and many myths describe their conflicts. The myth incorporated moral lessons for relationships between fathers and sons, older and younger brothers, and husbands and wives. Set poked out Horus's left eye, so Horus cut off Set's testicles, making him sometimes known as the god of infertility. It has also been suggested that the myth may reflect historical events. According to the Shabaka stone, Geb divided Egypt into two halves, giving Upper Egypt, the desert south, to Set and Lower Egypt, the region of the delta in the north, to Horus, in order to end their feud. However, according to the stone, in a later judgment Geb gave all Egypt to Horus. Interpreting this myth as a historical record would lead one to believe that Lower Egypt, Horus' land, conquered Upper Egypt, Set's land, but, in fact, Upper Egypt conquered Lower Egypt. So the myth cannot be simply interpreted. Several theories exist to explain the discrepancy. For instance, since both Horus and Set were worshipped in Upper Egypt prior to unification, perhaps the myth reflects a struggle within Upper Egypt prior to unification, in which a Horus worshipping group subjected a Set worshipping group. What is known is that during the Second Dynasty, there was a period in which the king Paribsen's name or Sarak M- which had been surmounted by Horus falcon in the First Dynasty M- was for a time surmounted by a Set animal, suggesting some kind of religious struggle. It was ended at the end of the dynasty by Kasekhumli, who surmounted his Sarak with both a falcon of Horus and a Set animal, indicating some kind of compromise had been reached. Regardless, once the two lands were united, Seth and Horus were often shown together crowning the new pharaohs, as a symbol of their power over both Lower and Upper Egypt. Queens of the First Dynasty bore the title She Who Sees Horus and Set. The pyramid texts present the pharaoh as a fusion of the two deities. Evidently, pharaohs believed that they balanced and reconciled competing cosmic principles. Eventually the dual god Horus Set appeared, combining features of both deities as was common in Egyptian theology, the most familiar example being Amun-Re. Set is also spelt. Later Egyptians interpreted the myth of the conflict between Set and Osiris/Horus as an analogy for the struggle between the desert, represented by Set, and the fertilizing floods of the Nile, Osiris/Horus. As the Ogadone system became more assimilated with the Ennead One, as a result of creeping increase of the identification of Adam as Ra, itself a result of the joining of Upper and Lower Egypt, Set's position in this became considered. With Horus, as Ra's heir on earth, Set, previously the chief god, for Lower Egypt, required an appropriate role as well, and so was identified as Ra's main hero, who thought Apep each night, during Ra's journey, as sun god, across the underworld. He was thus often depicted standing on the prow of Ra's night bark spearing Apop in the form of a serpent, turtle, or other dangerous water animals. Surprisingly, in some late period representations, such as in the Persian period temple at Hidus in the Kargal oasis, Set was represented in this role with a falcon's head, taking on the guise of Horus, despite the fact that Set was usually considered in quite a different position with regard to heroism. This assimilation also led to Anubis being displaced, in areas where he was worshipped, as ruler of the underworld, with his situation being explained by his being the son of Osiris. As Isis represented life, Anubis' mother was identified instead as Nephthys. This led to an explanation in which Nephthys, frustrated by Set's lack of sexual interest in her, disguised herself as Isis, but failed to gain Set's attention, because he was infertile. Osiris mistook Nephthys for Isis and they had conceived Anubis, resulting in Anubis' birth. In some later texts, after Set lost the connection to the desert, and thus infertility, Anubis was identified as Seth's son, as Set is Nephthys' husband. Set is. In the mythology, Set has a great many wives, including some foreign goddesses, and several children. Some of the most notable wives, beyond Nephthys/Nebuchadnezzar, are Neith, with whom he is said to have fathered Sabak, and Charut, by whom he is said to have fathered Apuat, though Apuat is also said to be a son of Anubis or Osiris. Tatarut, Hatshepsut, one of the Hours, a feminine was-beast-headed goddess who is variously described as wife or daughter of Set, and the two Canaanite deities Anat and Astarte, both of whom are equally skilled in love and war, two things which Set himself was famous for. Set in the Second Intermediate and Ramesside periods. During the Second Intermediate period, a group of Asiatic foreign chiefs known as the Hyksos, literally, rulers of foreign lands, gained the rulership of Egypt, and ruled the Nile Delta, from Averus. They chose Set, originally Lower Egypt's chief god, the god of foreigners and the god they found most similar to their own chief god, as their patron, and so Set became worshipped as the chief god once again. The Hyksos king Apophis is recorded as worshipping Set in a monolatric way, he writes chose for his lord the god Seth. He didn't worship any other deity in the whole land, except Seth. Januarius Man argues that, because the ancient Egyptians could never conceive of a lonely god lacking personality, Seth the desert god, who was worshipped exclusively, represented a manifestation of evil. One writes When Amosi overthrew the Hyksos and expelled them from Egypt, Egyptian attitudes towards Asiatic foreigners became xenophobic, and royal propaganda discredited the period of Hyksos rule. Nonetheless, the Set cult at Averus flourished, and the Egyptian garrison of Amos stationed there became part of the priesthood of Set at Averus. The founder of the 19th dynasty, Ramesses I, came from a military family from Averus with strong ties to the priesthood of Set. Several of the Ramesside kings were named for Set, most notably Seti, literally, man of Set, and Setnakhet, literally, Set is strong. In addition, one of the garrisons of Ramesses II held Set as its patron deity, and Ramesses II erected the so-called 400 years stela at Pi-Ramesses, commemorating the 400-year anniversary of the Set cult in the Delta. Set also became associated with foreign gods during the New Kingdom, particularly in the Delta. Set was also identified by the Egyptians with the Hittite deity Teshub, who was a storm god like Set,